There's a choke point on the map, 21 miles wide at its narrowest, and every time a warship moves through it, your grocery bill moves with it. Not eventually, not in theory. Within 72 hours of a closure signal, global wheat futures spike. Within a week, cooking oil prices in Lagos, Karachi, and Cairo follow. Within a month, families in 37 countries are eating less. That is not speculation. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization documented this transmission effect in 2011 and again in 2019. The World Bank confirmed the correlation in a 2022 commodity stress report covering 14 major food importing nations. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 20% of the world's traded oil. That oil moves the ships move the fertilizer. The fertilizer grows the grain. Pull one link and the chain collapses loudly, expensively, and always on the plates of people. 20% of global oil. Let that number sit with you. There is a solution. It is old. It is cheap. It does not require pipelines or warships or futures contracts. Communities have used it for 6,000 years across every continent. It kept populations fed through sieges, droughts, and the collapse of empires. Measurably, provably more resilient than the centralized commodity system that replaced it. They did not forget this existed. That would be an accident. They buried it. That was not an accident. It was a decision. This is the story of decentralized grain storage, what it does, how it works, and why food security was never supposed to reach you. As something you could build yourself in your own community for almost nothing? Welcome back to World Economy Decode, where we open the vaults. If you are not subscribed yet, hit subscribe and the bell right now. This is where we dig up everything the industry tried to bury. Today the vault is heavier than most because this one connects a narrow strip of water in the Persian Gulf to the price of bread in your kitchen, and to a solution that empires knew and that the modern defense agricultural complex has spent decades making invisible. It is 3100 BC, the Nile Delta, the air smells of river mud and dry chaff. The flood season has just ended and the harvest is in, but the harvest is not going to the market. It is going underground. Egyptian granary overseers, working under the Nissit-Baiti storage protocol, were distributing grain across hundreds of village-level sealed silos built from Nile clay. Sealed with natron salt and tracked on papyrus registers, each village held its own reserve. Each district held a larger communal buffer. The central granary in Memphis held the National Strategic Reserve. This was not charity, it was architecture. The system was designed so that no single point of failure, no flood, no drought, no war could collapse the food supply of the entire civilization. The Ebers Papyrus references grain storage techniques that produced no spoilage over multi-year periods. Egyptian administrators documented grain that held its nutritional viability for 5 to 7 years under proper storage conditions. The same grain available. 2,000 years passed, a different ocean, a different civilization with no contact with Egypt whatsoever. It is now approximately 900 CE in the highlands of what is today southern Mexico. The Mixtec and later the Aztec administrators were running a similar system. The Quezcamatla clay and wattle granary built at the household level was storing maize and beans in humidity-controlled chambers. When the Spanish arrived in the 1520s, the chronicler Bernardino D. wrote that Aztec communities could sustain themselves for 2 to 3 years without trade. Then look west, ancient China, the Changping granary system, established formally under Emperor Wu of Han around 110 BCE, a network of state and community granaries distributed across provinces. The design principle was to sever the connection between regional harvest failure and regional starvation. If one province failed, neighboring distributed reserves could flow inward. No price spike, no panic, no famine following drought. 3 civilizations, 3 separate continents, 3 independently developed systems that arrived at the same architectural conclusion. Food security is a local infrastructure problem, not a global trade problem. That is a fundamental truth about how human survival actually works, a truth that the last 100 years of commodity market design has systematically dismantled. In 2013, researchers at Wageningen University in the Netherlands, one of the world's leading agricultural science institutions, published a detailed systems analysis of food supply chain risk. The lead author, Dr. Cor Langeveld, and his team modeled what happens to national food security when a country sources too much staple grain through very few corridors. The results were precise. A 72-hour disruption to a single major corridor produced a 14.3% average price spike in dependent nations within just 1 week. A 14-day disruption produced cascading shortages in low buffer nations within 30 days. The mechanism was not scarcity itself. It was the absence of local reserve infrastructure. This is the exact infrastructure every major ancient civilization had built, and that modern commodity market design had replaced with just-in-time global supply chains. The problem was not the disruption. The problem was the absence of buffers that used to exist and were systematically removed. The science of why distributed grain storage works is straightforward. Sealed, low-humidity, temperature-stable grain storage suppresses the three primary spoilage vectors. It stops oxidative degradation, fungal growth, and insect infestation. Studies confirmed that hermetically sealed storage at the community level achieved 97.8%. Preservation rates. Using metal silos costing between $40 and $80, communities reduced post-harvest losses from roughly 30% to under 2%, 30% down to under 2%, all by using a sealed metal container that costs less than a single week's worth of groceries. The technology involved was not novel. It was a modern material implementation of a storage principle that was standard practice for most of human history. This information used to travel through families for generations because it worked. That chain broke somewhere, but it does not have to stay broken. The World Food Programme formally endorsed distributed community grain storage in its 2020 resilience framework. The endorsement is in the document. It did not make the news. So why is distributed local grain storage not standard infrastructure in every food insecure nation on Earth? Here is what a $778 billion industry looks like. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon Technologies, By Systems, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Boeing Defense. These are the primary beneficiaries of a world in which food security is tied to geopolitical stability, which is tied to military presence, which is tied to defense contracts. A world in which the Strait of Hormuz is a permanent pressure point is a world in which military deterrence budgets are permanent and growing. A world in which local communities can feed themselves for 2 years without a functioning trade corridor is a world in which that pressure point loses its leverage. That is the connection, not a conspiracy, a financial architecture. You cannot patent a sealed grain silo. You cannot trademark a clay storage vessel. You cannot build a recurring subscription model around a community deciding to store 6 months of rice in a metal container. There is no replacement cartridge. There is no annual maintenance contract. There is no futures position to manage. There is no shipping lane to protect and therefore no warship to fund and therefore no defense contract to award. The money is not in the solution. The money is in the problem remaining unsolved. The regulatory dimension compounds this. In the United States, the USDA's Commodity Storage Certification Framework was written primarily by and for large-scale commercial grain elevator operators. Community-scale storage initiatives face the same compliance overhead as industrial facilities not because the safety requirements demand it, but because the regulatory structure was never designed with community-scale operators in mind. The cost of navigating that structure is prohibitive for a village grain cooperative. It is not prohibitive for Archer Daniels Midland. That is not oversight. That is architecture, deliberate and sustained. Now, here is exactly what to do with distributed grain storage at the household and community level today. Get materials available in most countries for under $100. What you need: a hermetically sealed metal silo or food-grade ADP plastic drum, 2250-liter capacity per household member per month of reserve, available through agricultural supply retailers or online farm supply stores. Cost: $40 to $80 for metal silos. $15 to $30 for food-grade plastic drums with airtight lids. Oxygen absorbers available online, roughly $8 to $12 per pack of 50. These are the same technology used in commercial food packaging. Use dry, whole kernel grain like rice, wheat berries, dried maize, or legumes. Whole kernel, not flour. Flour oxidizes. Whole grain does not. Step 1. Dry your grain before storage. Spread it on a clean surface in direct sun for 2 to 6 hours. Target moisture content is 12% or below. You can verify this with a grain moisture meter, available for $15 to $20. Step 2. Fill your container to within 2 inches of the top. Do not compress the grain. Step 3. Place 2 for oxygen absorbers on top of the grain. For a 20-liter container, use 2 absorbers. Step 4. Seal the lid immediately and firmly. For metal silos, close the locking ring. For ADP drums, press until the seal clicks. Step 5. Label the container with the grain type and seal date. Store in the coolest, driest location available. Watch for this. Within 12 to 24 hours, the oxygen absorbers will have consumed the residual oxygen inside the container. On flexible containers, you will see the sides pull slightly inward. That visible inward flex confirms the seal is working and preservation is active. One honest limitation: this system protects against supply chain disruption but does not replace dietary variety. A 6-month reserve is a resilience buffer. Pair it with preserved legumes, canned vegetables, and a household garden for genuine food security. A 6-month grain reserve for a family of 4, approximately $180 to $240 in grain plus $60 to $120 in storage equipment. Total, under $360 one time with equipment that lasts 15 to 20 years. The alternative, complete dependence on a global supply chain anchored to narrow straits that military powers have threatened to close. That alternative has no price ceiling. It never did. 6,000 years ago, Egyptian administrators understood that food security was a local infrastructure problem. Modern science at Wageningen and Simmet confirmed the same principle with precise data. A $778 billion defense industry is financially structured around that principle remaining invisible, and a sealed metal container costing $40 can begin to return that security to any household that chooses it. This knowledge did not disappear. Someone made sure it stayed buried. The Strait of Hormuz will be a pressure point again. The futures markets will spike again. The headlines will describe it as inevitable and unpredictable. It is neither. It is a design dependency, and design dependencies can be dismantled, one grain silo at a time. If this video opened something for you, subscribe now. Every vault we open is built on the one before it. The next vault opens soon. What is inside is even heavier than this.